The city was a tinderbox, simmering with decades of unspoken tension. All it took was a single spark, a routine traffic stop gone horrifically wrong, to ignite a blaze that would consume everything. Nobody in that courtroom, not even Judge Judy herself, was prepared for the raw, unedited truth about to be played. A truth that had already ripped a city apart, fueled by a single, deadly encounter, and now threatened to tear down the very foundations of trust. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a psychological war fought inch by agonizing inch, where every word was a weapon and every glance a challenge. From the moment the doors of that courtroom swung open, a heavy silence fell, charged with unspoken grievances and the ghosts of a broken community. The air itself felt thick, suffocating, as if the weight of an entire city's rage had condensed into a palpable force, pressing down on everyone present. On one side sat Michael Slager, a former police officer, his face a mask of strained composure, yet beneath it, a tremor, a flicker of something ancient and primal, fear. His attorneys, a formidable defense team, tried to project an aura of unwavering confidence, but even their practiced smiles couldn't quite reach their eyes. They knew what was at stake. They knew the world was watching. Across the aisle, the family of Walter Scott, their faces etched with grief and an almost unbearable anticipation. Their pain was a silent scream, a constant, aching presence in the room. They weren't just seeking justice, they were seeking a truth that had been buried, distorted, and almost lost forever. Their legal counsel, composed and sharp, carried the hopes of a community desperate for answers. And then there was Judge Judy Scheindlin. Perched on her bench, she was a figure of unyielding authority, her gaze piercing, unwavering, capable of dissecting a lie with a single, dismissive glance. She had seen it all: the cunning, the deceit, the raw desperation of human folly. But even Judge Judy, with all her years of experience, could sense that this case was different. This wasn't just about a few $1,000s, this was about the soul of a city, about the very definition of justice in a deeply fractured society. From the first gavel strike, the tension in the courtroom was so thick you could almost taste it, a metallic tang of fear and righteous anger. The initial police reports had painted a clear picture: a dedicated officer, a dangerous suspect, a struggle, a justified use of force. It was a narrative designed to protect, to explain away, to silence the growing whispers of doubt. But Judge Judy wasn't interested in narratives. She was interested in facts. And the facts, she instinctively knew, were far more complex, far more chilling, than anyone had initially dared to admit. The defense opened, confidently recounting Officer Slager's version of events. It was a story crafted for maximum sympathy, portraying a dedicated public servant confronted by a fleeing, non-compliant suspect. They spoke of a routine traffic stop, a broken taillight, a minor infraction that escalated into a life-or-death struggle. Slager, they claimed, feared for his life when Walter Scott allegedly grabbed his taser. They painted a vivid, harrowing picture of a police officer cornered, making a split-second decision under immense duress. The courtroom listened, a few nods scattered among the public gallery, a murmur of assent here and there. For a moment, it seemed plausible. It seemed understandable. But Judge Judy's eyes never left Slager's face. She watched the subtle tensing of his jaw, the almost imperceptible hesitation before certain answers, the way his gaze flickered away when recounting the crucial moments. She'd seen these tells 1,000 times before. She sensed the practiced delivery, the carefully chosen words designed to obscure, not illuminate. There was a hollow ring to some of his statements, a faint echo of untruth that only a seasoned observer could pick up. The prosecutor, representing the Scott family, began his cross-examination, his voice calm but imbued with a steely resolve. He wasn't rushing, not yet. He started with the basics: the time of day, the location, the initial reason for the stop. Slowly, methodically, he began to chip away at the edges of Slager's carefully constructed facade. Questions about police protocol, about de-escalation techniques, about the distance between the officer and the driver at various points. Each question, seemingly innocuous, was a tiny chisel against the stone of the defense's narrative. Slager's answers, initially confident, began to waver. A slight shift in his posture, a subtle increase in the speed of his speech. But that wasn't even the worst part. The prosecutor seemed to imply with every pointed query, his tone hinting at a deeper, darker truth lurking beneath the surface. The courtroom leaned forward, sensing the shift in momentum. The air grew tighter, the silence more profound. Judge Judy interjected, her voice cutting through the growing tension like a finely honed blade. Her questions were direct, surgical, bypassing the legal jargon and cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "Officer, you state he grabbed your taser. Was he facing you? Was he advancing? Describe the exact grip." Slager stammered, his earlier fluidity replaced by a disjointed recounting, a jumble of half-recalled details. He was losing control of his narrative, and everyone could see it. The image of the composed officer began to crack. The judge's gaze intensified, pinning Slager to his chair. She didn't raise her voice, but her presence filled the room, demanding absolute honesty. She noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the way he swallowed hard before responding. He was under pressure, immense pressure, and he was starting to fold. "And you say you feared for your life," Judge Judy continued, her voice devoid of emotion, "yet you pursued him on foot for an extended period. Why not call for backup and maintain a safe distance if your life was truly in danger?" The question hung in the air, a devastating blow to the core of Slager's justification. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Slager's defense attorney objected, citing speculation, but Judge Judy waved it off with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Answer the question, officer," she commanded, her eyes never leaving Slager's. His face flushed, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. He mumbled something about protocol, about not letting a suspect flee. It was weak, and everyone knew it. The seed of doubt, planted earlier, began to sprout into a creeping vine of suspicion. The prosecutor then shifted gears, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying immense weight. "Officer Slager," he began, "you testified that you deployed your taser. Can you confirm for the court that you, in fact, deployed your taser during this altercation?" Slager, regaining a sliver of composure, affirmed, "Yes, I did. I believed it was my only option." The prosecutor paused, letting the answer settle, then delivered his next line, a subtle micro-hook that sent a shiver down the spine of every listener. "And where, exactly, did that taser fall, officer, after you deployed it?" Slager hesitated. His eyes darted to his attorneys, then back to the prosecutor. The courtroom was silent, a suffocating vacuum where every breath seemed impossibly loud. He described the taser falling somewhere near the struggle, vague and unspecific. It was a small detail, seemingly insignificant, yet Judge Judy's gaze narrowed. She recognized the classic tactic of evasiveness. There was something in that detail, something hidden. Then, the prosecutor dropped the bombshell, not with a shout, but with a quiet, devastating certainty. "Your Honor," he addressed Judge Judy, his voice resonating with gravitas, "the defense has painted a picture based on an incomplete and, frankly, misleading account of events. But what the defense and Officer Slager failed to mention, what they desperately tried to bury, is that this entire incident, this life-or-death struggle, was captured on video." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom, quickly followed by an uproar. Slager's face went white, his carefully constructed mask shattering into a million pieces of sheer, unadulterated terror. His attorney scrambled, objecting wildly, protesting the introduction of new evidence, claiming it was prejudicial, out of context. But it was too late. The words were out. The truth, in its rawest form, was now knocking on the courtroom door. Everything changed the moment this piece of evidence appeared. The narrator might interject, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Judge Judy slammed her gavel, the sharp crack reverberating through the stunned silence. Her voice was ice, cutting through the chaos. "Counsel, approach," she commanded. "There is no new evidence here if this video pertains directly to the incident. If it exists, it should have been disclosed. I want to see this video. Now." Her eyes, colder than steel, were fixed on Slager, who sat slumped in his chair, visibly shaking. He knew. Everyone knew. His lies were about to be exposed, brutally, undeniably, for the entire world to see. The prosecutor nodded, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Your Honor, we have the video. It was provided to us by an anonymous citizen who courageously came forward. It provides an uninterrupted, unedited account of the entire altercation." He gestured to a technician who began to set up a monitor. The hum of the equipment filled the unnerving silence. The Scott family clutched each other, tears already streaming down their faces, knowing what was coming, knowing the pain of reliving it, but also knowing that the truth was finally about to breathe. The screen flickered to life. The resolution was grainy, shaky, filmed on a cell phone, but the images were devastatingly clear. The narrator's voice would drop, tense and hushed, describing every frame, every agonizing second. The video began. A man, Walter Scott, running away from the camera, away from the officer. His back was turned. He wasn't lunging, wasn't fighting, wasn't threatening. He was fleeing. Officer Slager was in pursuit, closing the distance. The defense's narrative of a struggle was already starting to unravel. Judge Judy watched, her expression unreadable, but the subtle tightening around her eyes spoke volumes. Every frame rewrote the officer's carefully constructed story, the narrator articulated, emphasizing the crushing weight of visual evidence. The prosecutor pointed out key moments. "Here, Your Honor, we see Mr. Scott running, not advancing, not resisting physically in a threatening manner, merely attempting to evade." Slager's face was a mask of utter despair, his eyes fixed on the screen, seeing his meticulously crafted lie disintegrate before him. Then came the taser. The video clearly showed Slager deploying it. Scott flinched, stumbled, but continued to run. There was no apparent moment where Scott grabbed the taser from Slager. The taser, in fact, fell to the ground, nowhere near Scott's grasp, as Slager continued his pursuit. The courtroom buzzed with renewed whispers, a growing wave of disbelief and anger. The true horror was still moments away, the narrator hinted, preparing the audience for the ultimate betrayal. And then, the moment that stopped time, that ripped through the fabric of the courtroom, that echoed across a nation. Walter Scott, still running, still with his back to the officer, fell. Officer Slager, instead of closing in to apprehend, instead of attempting to de-escalate, instead of calling for backup, drew his firearm. The distinct, sickening pops of gunshots filled the courtroom, raw and visceral, amplified by the stunned silence. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 shots fired into the back of an unarmed man, running away. The video captured it all. Scott collapsing to the ground, motionless. Slager approaching, slowly, deliberately. And then, in a chilling act that defied belief, Slager calmly picked up something from the ground, the taser, and placed it near Scott's fallen body. It was a plant. A calculated, cold-blooded attempt to manufacture evidence, to corroborate a lie that was now obliterated by the irrefutable truth of the video. The courtroom exploded. Not with shouts, but with a guttural cry of anguish from Scott's family, a collective moan of disbelief from the public, and a searing, suffocating silence from the defense table. Officer Slager, completely broken, buried his face in his hands, his body racked with uncontrollable sobs. His attorneys were pale, their faces a mixture of shock and resignation. There was no defending this. There was no explaining this away. The air crackled with raw, unbridled fury. Judge Judy sat utterly still, her gaze fixed on the screen, then slowly, deliberately, turned to Slager. Her voice, when it came, was a low, dangerous growl, devoid of any of her usual sharp inflections, replaced by a chilling calm that was far more terrifying. "Officer Slager," she began, each word a hammer blow, "you testified under oath that Mr. Scott grabbed your taser. You testified that you feared for your life. This video, officer, unequivocally shows Mr. Scott running away. His back to you. It shows you firing 8 shots into his back. And it shows you, officer, planting evidence next to his lifeless body." She paused, letting the full weight of her words sink in, not just for Slager, but for every person in that room. "What, Officer Slager," she continued, her voice rising slightly but still controlled, "do you have to say for yourself now?" Slager could only stammer, incoherent words tumbling out, choked by sobs. He tried to speak of fear, of panic, of the adrenaline. But the video had rendered all his excuses utterly meaningless. He was caught, exposed. His lies, painstakingly constructed, had been demolished by the simple, unvarnished truth captured by a single, brave bystander. The weight of the evidence became unbearable, the narrator emphasized, highlighting Slager's complete psychological collapse. The witness, Fiden Santana, the man who filmed the video, was then called to the stand. He was nervous, visibly trembling, but spoke with a quiet resolve that commanded attention. He recounted his fear, his hesitation to come forward, knowing the potential repercussions of challenging a police officer. He spoke of the moral imperative that compelled him to share the truth, even if it put his own safety at risk. "I just knew it wasn't right," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I saw what happened, and it wasn't what they were saying." Judge Judy listened, her gaze softening slightly, a rare display of empathy for the witness. She acknowledged his courage, recognizing the immense pressure he had faced. The defense, in a desperate, futile attempt, tried to discredit Santana, questioning his motives, his proximity, the stability of his phone. But his testimony was unwavering, simple, and perfectly aligned with the damning visual evidence. The truth, once hidden, now had a face, a voice, and undeniable proof, the narrator might state, cementing Santana's crucial role. Expert witnesses followed, dissecting the video frame by frame. Ballistics experts confirmed the trajectory of the bullets, the entry wounds in Scott's back. Use of force experts categorically stated that Slager's actions were a gross violation of standard police procedure, an excessive and unjustified use of deadly force against a fleeing, unarmed suspect. They detailed the moments when Slager could have de-escalated, when he could have called for backup, when he could have simply let Scott run and pursued him through other means. Each expert testimony further cemented Slager's guilt, leaving no room for doubt, no shred of plausible deniability. The prosecution also presented evidence of the aftermath, the immediate chaos in North Charleston, the protests that erupted almost immediately after the video's release, the outpouring of grief and outrage that threatened to tear the city apart. The city exploded, not just in metaphor, but in real, palpable tension, demonstrations, and a community crying out for accountability. The video hadn't just changed a courtroom. It had changed a city, a state, and initiated a national conversation about policing and race. The defense, facing an insurmountable mountain of evidence, tried to pivot to Slager's psychological state. They argued for heat of the moment, stress, fear, a last-ditch attempt to humanize their client and mitigate the horror of his actions. They even tried to subtly tarnish Walter Scott's character, bringing up minor past infractions, attempting to paint him as someone who brought it upon himself by resisting. But Judge Judy was having none of it. She cut through the rhetoric, her voice sharp and uncompromising. "Counsel," she addressed the defense attorney, her eyes flashing, "the video shows a man running away. It shows your client planting evidence. No amount of stress or fear can justify that. No past record of the victim, however minor, can justify a summary execution in the back." Her logic was undeniable, her moral compass unshakable. The psychological pressure in the room was immense, almost suffocating. Slager, now a shadow of his former self, sat hunched, devoid of all hope. The prosecutor delivered his closing arguments, weaving together the facts, the video, the testimonies, and the community's anguish into a powerful narrative of injustice and betrayal. He spoke of trust, of the uniform, and of the sacred duty to protect and serve. Duty's Slager had utterly failed. He reminded the court of the devastating impact of Slager's actions, not just on Walter Scott and his family, but on the fabric of society, on the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they swore to protect. The defense's closing was a desperate plea for understanding, for mercy, for a shred of doubt. They tried to reintroduce the idea of a fleeting moment of panic, of the dangers of police work, of the impossibility of perfect judgment under extreme duress. But the images of the video, burned into the minds of everyone present, rendered their words hollow, without substance. Then came Judge Judy's final address. The courtroom fell into a profound, anticipatory silence. Her gaze swept across the room, settling on Slager, then on Scott's family, then encompassing the entire public gallery. Her voice, now firm and resonant, carried the weight of justice itself. She meticulously summarized the evidence, each point a nail in the coffin of Slager's defense. She spoke of the initial police report, the carefully constructed lies, and the absolute, devastating truth revealed by the bystander's video. "This court has witnessed a grave miscarriage of justice," Judge Judy declared, her voice echoing with the gravity of her words. "Officer Slager, you violated your oath. You abused your authority. You not only took a life without justification, but you compounded that atrocity with a calculated act of deception, attempting to manipulate the truth and subvert justice. The evidence is not merely overwhelming, it is irrefutable." She paused, allowing the crushing weight of her judgment to settle. "The footage," she continued, "a testament to the courage of a citizen, lays bare the horrifying reality of what transpired that day. It shows a man, Walter Scott, running away. It shows you Officer Slager firing 8 shots into his back. And it shows you, in a moment of chilling clarity, planting a taser next to his lifeless body to concoct a false narrative of self-defense." The gavel struck, a sound that reverberated beyond the courtroom walls, a sound that carried the force of truth finally prevailing over deceit. "Judgment is entered in favor of the plaintiffs," Judge Judy announced, her voice unwavering. "This court finds Officer Michael Slager responsible for the wrongful death of Walter Scott, and his actions represent an egregious violation of civil rights and trust. The damages awarded will reflect the profound loss and suffering caused by this senseless act." The decision was not merely a legal one, it was a societal declaration. The city, which had exploded in the raw anguish of injustice, now had a pathway to healing, however long and arduous. The truth, once hidden, had been brought into the light by the unwavering gaze of Judge Judy and the undeniable power of a citizen's lens. The aftermath in North Charleston was immediate and profound. Slager was fired, then indicted for murder, and eventually pleaded guilty to a federal civil rights charge, receiving a 20-year prison sentence. The video, played repeatedly on national news, ignited a fierce debate across America about police accountability, racial bias, and the power of civilian oversight. It forced a raw, uncomfortable conversation that had been long overdue. The initial reports, the official statements, the attempts to control the narrative, all were utterly obliterated by 80 seconds of shaky cell phone footage. The story of Walter Scott became a symbol, a stark reminder that in the age of omnipresent cameras, the truth, however inconvenient or horrific, will often find a way out. It cemented the importance of bystander video as a critical tool for justice and transparency, forever changing the landscape of police-community relations. But this wasn't the end of the story for the officer, or for a nation grappling with its own reflection. The scars on the city of North Charleston remained, deep and complex, a constant reminder of the day a routine traffic stop became a national tragedy. The courtroom had delivered its judgment, but the larger questions of systemic injustice, implicit bias, and the arduous path towards true reconciliation still lingered, echoing in the hearts and minds of millions. The fight for justice, as Judge Judy well knew, was never truly over. The gavel may have fallen, but the echoes of truth, once hidden, now reverberated across a nation, demanding to be heard and acted upon. The conversation had only just begun.